When I married Daniel, I thought I was stepping into a fairy tale. He was everything I'd ever wanted, kind, handsome, successful. And his family, well, they seemed perfect too. His father was warm and welcoming, and his mother, Evelyn, oh, Evelyn, she was beautiful, poised, the kind of woman who could command a room without saying a word. But little did I know, Evelyn wasn't just my mother-in-law. She was competition, and she was better at being a wife to Daniel than I ever could be. It started subtly. At first, I thought I was imagining things. Evelyn would show up at our house unannounced, always with a casserole or a pie, her makeup flawless, her heels clicking on the floor like she owned the place. Daniel mentioned you were struggling with dinner ideas, she'd say, handing me the dish with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I thought I'd help. I smiled and thanked her, but inside I felt the sting. Struggling? Daniel said that? Sure, I wasn't exactly a gourmet chef, but I was trying. Yet Evelyn's food was always better, perfectly seasoned, beautifully presented. Daniel would take one bite and groan in pleasure, and I'd watch as my efforts paled in comparison. The tension grew in small, cutting moments. When we hosted a dinner party, Evelyn swooped in, rearranging my table settings and critiquing my choice of wine. A Chardonnay with steak, she said, laughing softly. Oh, sweetie, no. Daniel didn't say a word. He just let her take over, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I stood there humiliated, watching as Evelyn became the star of my own event. Guests flocked to her, complimenting her expertise, her charm, and I was just the awkward hostess in the background. I tried to talk to Daniel about it. She's your mother, I said, not your wife. He frowned. What's that supposed to mean? It means she oversteps. She acts like she runs our household. She's just trying to help, he replied, brushing it off. You're overreacting. Overreacting. That word burned like acid. I wasn't overreacting. I was suffocating under the weight of Evelyn's perfection, her constant reminders that she was better at everything I was supposed to be doing. Things came to a head the night Daniel and I had our first big fight. We were arguing about something trivial. Finances, maybe, but it escalated quickly. I just wish you could be more like my mom, he snapped. The words hit me like a slap. I stared at him, my chest tightening, tears threatening to spill. He realized too late what he had said, but the damage was done. From that moment on, Evelyn's shadow loomed larger than ever. She started coming over more often, not just unannounced but with purpose. Cleaning our house, folding our laundry, even slipping marriage advice to Daniel. Men like to feel taken care of, she'd say, her voice dripping with wisdom. Daniel's father always appreciated the little things I did for him. I bit my tongue, resisting the urge to scream. But inside, I was crumbling. How could I compete with a woman who had decades of experience being the perfect wife? A woman Daniel idolized? One day, Evelyn crossed a line I couldn't ignore. I came home early from work to find her in my kitchen, wearing an apron, humming to herself as she stirred a pot of stew. What are you doing here? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Oh, Daniel called, she said breezily. He mentioned you were busy with work, so I thought I'd help out. Help out. Always helping. Always swooping in to save the day, to remind me how inadequate I was. I couldn't hold it in any longer. Do you realize how overbearing you are? I snapped. You treat this house like it's yours. Like I'm some incompetent child who can't handle her own marriage. Evelyn raised an eyebrow, her calm demeanor never faltering. I'm sorry you feel that way, dear. But maybe if you focused more on Daniel's needs, I wouldn't have to step in. Her words sliced through me like a knife. Get out, I whispered, my voice shaking. Get out of my house. That night, I told Daniel everything. How Evelyn made me feel, how her constant presence was suffocating me. But instead of supporting me, he defended her. She's just trying to help, he said again, as if that excuse could erase the damage. She wants what's best for us. No, I shot back. She wants what's best for you. I'm just an afterthought. Our argument spiraled out of control. By the end of it, I wasn't sure who I was angrier with, Evelyn for invading my marriage or Daniel for letting her. I started to pull away after that, from Daniel, from Evelyn, from the version of myself that felt like I would never measure up. I threw myself into work, avoiding home as much as possible. but the distance only made things worse. Evelyn seized the opportunity to step in even more. She started redecorating our house, claiming it was for Daniel's benefit. She bought him clothes, cooked his favorite meals, even scheduled his doctor's appointments. It was as if she was proving a point. I didn't deserve him, and deep down, I started to believe her. One night, Daniel came home late. He smelled like Evelyn's perfume, a soft floral scent that clung to him like a second skin. I didn't ask where he'd been. I didn't need to, I already knew. "She's not your wife," I said quietly. "I am." He looked at me, his face filled with guilt and confusion. "I didn't mean for it to get like this," he admitted. She knows me so well." That was the moment I realized I wasn't just competing with Evelyn, I was losing to her. I reached a breaking point soon after. Evelyn showed up at our house with her suitcase, announcing that she was staying for a few weeks to help out, while I was busy with work. "No," I said firmly, "you're not staying here." Evelyn looked at me, her lips curving into a patronizing smile. "And who's going to stop me?" It was a battle of wills, one I wasn't sure I could win. But for the first time, I stood my ground. I wasn't going to let Evelyn take over my life any longer. In the days that followed, I started to take back control. I stopped letting Evelyn dictate how I ran my household. I stopped letting Daniel rely on her as a crutch. And most importantly, I stopped comparing myself to her. But the damage had already been done. My marriage was cracked, fractured by the weight of Evelyn's influence and Daniel's inability to set boundaries. I don't know if we'll ever fully recover. But one thing is certain, I will never again let someone make me feel like I'm not enough. After taking back control, I realized how much I had let Evelyn dictate the terms of my life. But the truth is, the battle wasn't just about her, it was about me and Daniel. Somewhere along the way, we had stopped being a team. We had let someone else fill the gaps that should have been ours to bridge. I began making changes, not just in our household, but in myself. I started therapy to understand why Evelyn's presence had affected me so deeply. I worked on my confidence, on believing that I was enough, not because I could bake the perfect pie or fold the laundry flawlessly, but because I was me. The hardest part, though, was addressing the rift between me and Daniel. One night, after weeks of tiptoeing around each other, I finally said what I had been holding in. "We need to talk about your mom." Daniel sighed, the wariness evident in his eyes. "Do we have to? It always ends in a fight." "Yes, we have to, because if we don't, this is going to destroy us." He looked at me, then really looked at me, and for the first time in a long time, I saw a flicker of understanding. "I never realized how much she was interfering," he admitted. "I thought she was just helping, but I see now how it's affected you. How it's affected us." I nodded, trying to keep my emotions in check. "It's not just her, Daniel. It's you too. You let her take over. You let her make me feel like I wasn't good enough." "I didn't mean to," he said softly. She's been my rock for so long. It was easier to let her step in than to deal with things myself." His honesty caught me off guard. For the first time, I saw his dependence on Evelyn not as a betrayal, but as a flaw, one we both needed to address. From that night on, things started to change. Daniel set boundaries with Evelyn, something I never thought I'd see. He stopped calling her for every little thing and started standing up for me when she tried to overstep. It wasn't easy. Evelyn didn't take the shift lightly. She would call, accusing me of turning Daniel against her. She'd show up unannounced, her disapproval written all over her face. But each time, Daniel stood firm. "This is our marriage, Mom," he said one day, his voice steady. "You have to let us figure it out on our own." Hearing him say those words felt like a weight lifting off my chest. For the first time, I felt like we were on the same side. Like we were rebuilding the foundation that Evelyn's presence had shaken. But it wasn't a perfect process. There were still moments of tension, moments when I doubted whether we could truly move past everything that had happened. Evelyn's influence had left deep scars, and healing them would take time. One evening, Evelyn invited us over for dinner. I hesitated to go, unsure of her motives. But Daniel insisted. "She wants to make amends," he said. "She knows she's gone too far." I wasn't convinced, but I went anyway. The dinner started awkwardly, with polite conversation and forced smiles. But halfway through the meal, Evelyn surprised me. "I owe you an apology," she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. I've been too involved in your marriage. I thought I was helping, but I see now that I'd overstepped." I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to reject her apology, to make her feel the same humiliation she had made me feel. But another part of me, the part that wanted peace, accepted it. "Thank you," I said, my voice steady. "That means a lot." Evelyn nodded, and for the first time I saw a glimmer of vulnerability in her eyes. She wasn't the invincible woman I had built up in my mind. She was human, flawed, and maybe even a little lost herself. The weeks that followed were a turning point. Evelyn still had her moments, but she began to step back, allowing me and Daniel to find our own rhythm. And Daniel, he started to see me in a new light, not as someone trying to replace his mother, but as his partner, his equal. I learned to let go of my resentment, not just toward Evelyn, but toward myself. I had spent so much time comparing myself to her, trying to live up to a standard that was never mine to meet. But now, I was learning to embrace who I was, a woman who was imperfect, but enough. Looking back, I realized that Evelyn wasn't the real problem. The real problem was the power I gave her. The way I let her presence dictate my worth. The way I let her perfection overshadow my identity. But I've taken that power back, and while my marriage is still a work in progress, it's stronger now than it's ever been. Because for the first time, it belongs to me and Daniel. Not Evelyn, not anyone else, just us.